Hey guys, welcome to section 7. In section 7, we're going to be going over functions. We're going to go over everything that you need to know and how to make your own functions. So, what is a function? A function is actually things you've already been calling. So, if you remember in the last section with the arrays, with push and unshift and sort, those are actually, I call them commands, but they're actually functions, okay? Now, functions, you might also hear the word method. It's the same thing. Um, it just depends on the language, depends on who you ask. But functions and methods, they're essentially the same thing. So, okay, so what is a function? So, a function is, as you can see in this picture here that I drew, it's a very bad picture, but I'll explain what it is, and hopefully it will help demonstrate what a function does and how it works. Okay. So a function is going to be like a box. And in this box, there's going to be some code, okay? And this box is going to have a name. So we called our box here box of code, all right? And you see inside this box, there's a bunch of code. That's what these squigglies are, okay? They're code. Uh, here on the left-hand side, we have our main program that we're programming in, and um, we are just, writing whatever it is that we want to write. And then if we want the code that is inside of this box, you call it by the name. Okay. Kind of like your mom. If your mom calls you by name, you're there at the flip of a dime, right? And she says, hey, so and so, get over here. You're there. So that's kind of how function is. You call it by the name and it shows up. All the code that is inside the box, it just opens all that code up and it spills it on there, okay, wherever you want it. So that's what this is, right? So we have some code here, and then we're going to call box of code, and box of code is going to take all the code that's in here and going to put it in here, right? Kind of like inject it into this little part of the code. Then we're going to keep going. We're going to have our own code that we have. Then we're going to call box of code again because we need this code again. So we call it again, and then it keeps going and going and going, and it finishes, okay? And why do we do that? Box that has a bunch of code in it. Well, it's for reusability. It's for simplicity. It's to make your life as a programmer and those programmers that you work with easier, right? That's the point of writing a function because it's way easier and way simpler to have a function name, right? Box of code. And this is not a this is not a good name for a function, by the way. You want to name your functions kind of like you name your variables, right? You want to name them describing what they do, okay? And in this case, it is easier to have one line of code, that's the name of the function, than it is to copy paste however many lines of code would be in here. This could be 4, 5, 6, 7 lines of code, and you could put it here, put it here, put it there. It would be a mess, right? It would be really hard to keep track of. And then what if you want to change some stuff in this code? Then it would be even more. It's easier when you abstract some of the logic that you have into its own little area. And that's what a function kind of is. That's what this box is, right? We're putting all of this code that does something and we're putting it in a little box and we're labeling that box. And anytime we need it, we're going to take the box and we're going to just, by the name, we're going to call the box by the name and it's going to dump all the code out right there when we need it, right? And that's kind of what a box is, or function. That's what kind of what a function is. So I'm going to show you this in code. But just keep this diagram in mind, okay? As we are going through this. So okay, so a here's an example of what a function is. So this is about as simple of a function as you can have right here. So the basic structure of every function is going to be this. You're going to have the keyword function, right? Because you're telling JavaScript in this case that, hey, I am going to declare a function. Um, Then you're gonna have the function name, right? This is the box name. And then these are the two curly braces, or not curly braces, two parentheses, right? You have them here too, if you notice. You're probably wondering, why did I put them there? Well, I put them there for a reason, and I put them here because of the parameters. Okay, now we're gonna go over parameters in a second, but function name right now doesn't have parameters. We're looking at this top one. So right now, don't worry about it, okay? And just focus on the basic structure of what a function essentially is. So again, you have to have the keyword function. Otherwise, JavaScript isn't going to know what you're doing. You're going to need the function name, the name of the function. You're going to need these two parentheses, okay? And then you're going to have these two curly braces. You're going to have one here in the beginning and one here at the end. And what these are is these are going to essentially just this is your box actually, right? This is essentially your box and all of the stuff that's inside of your box. Okay, this is all the code. So in our case, we have this one line. It's going to be a console log and it's going to say inside function name one. Well, let me put a one there and put a one here, and that's it. Okay. Now this is another function. This is function with function name two. And in this function, everything is the same. Okay, we have the keyword function telling JavaScript it's going to be a function, space, the function name, and we have our two parameters. What is a parameter? So a parameter are arguments that you pass to a function. Okay, so you can pass anything you want. These two can be, you can see here actually. Um, so function name two, right? You have high as the first parameter, and then you have this array that has 1, 2, 3 in it. Okay, that's how this works. So you can pass these in, and then what we're going to do is we're going to console log them. We're going to say parameter one equals parameter one, parameter two equals parameter two. So you're just passing things in. So you can kind of say like, I don't know, if we go back to our box analogy, you can think of it as you can think of this as kind of like there's holes in the box, right? I don't know, at the top of the box, not at the bottom. There's holes at the top of the box for you to put certain things in. Okay, so when you call it and you pass these things into it, it's going to do things to them. Okay, or it's going to use that to manipulate something inside the box when it's called. Okay, so it's kind of like that. You'll see when you run this code. So actually, you know what? Let's run it and let's see what happens. Okay, here it is. So here when we called function name one, we have this that console logged inside function name one. And then parameter one is going to equal high, right? That's what we have here. And then parameter two is going to equal 1, 2, 3. All right. So you see how when you pass these, you can manipulate them and you can do things with them inside of the function itself. And this is very useful. Okay, very useful because you can do different things. You'll see more of it. I have more examples. So okay, and then the other thing I want to go over is function overloading. Function overloading, it allows you to just use the same name. Um, you have the same name for two functions, but the parameters are different. Okay, different parameters. And I misspelled that. There we go. So, all right. So let's move on. Let's see what we got. What else we got here? Okay. So now we have a function called add that's taking in parameter A and B, and we're going to console log the addition of, or the sum of A and B, right? So we're going to say A plus B and console log it. So let's see what this looks like. There you go. So you see how we call it in between these two other console logs, and then we get that 3, right? Let me do this really quickly so we can get this out of the way so you can see it better. So let's run it again. Okay, here it is now. So you see here before, we have our code before, then we have our function call, and then we have our code after. Add 1, 2, and then we have the add, and then after add 1, 2. So again, that goes back to this, right? We have our code here, we call it our box, right? And then we have more code down here, and then we have call our box again, and then we have more code. That's what this is, okay? So you kind of see how you can call this multiple times if you want. And it just simplifies. Again, this is a very basic function, so maybe you don't see the purpose of it just yet, but you'll see more. You'll see as we keep going. So let's go over this one. Add with return. Now, this is this is the other thing that is kind of tricky to explain, but what a return is. Okay? So in a function, when you call a return, it exits the function. Okay, you can call a return, and if you return with a, well, in this case, we have our result. So what we did was we said, okay, result's going to equal a plus b. So this function is called add with return. We're going to take a and b, we're adding it, and then we're going to return this result. Okay, a return is usually, not always, but usually at the end of a function. And what a return does is it gives you back something out of the box. Okay. So I know I said that the box is kind of like, you know, you dump everything out of the box and that's all the code. Well, it's kind of like that, but that code disappears eventually, right? So like when we called add up here, okay, we have the console log before and after, and then the add call right in the middle. This code disappears, and this kind of like after this executes and it goes down to the after, this is gone. Okay. You can think of a return as the thing that's going to stay behind. Okay. It's going to stay behind. So I'll show you this. Okay. So here we have the same setup as before. Um, and this time we're calling add with return 1 comma 2. Okay. Now nothing's going to print here. And I'll explain why. Here it did because we called console log, right? Inside of this function. But here we're not calling console log, and it's not going to print either. And there's reasons why and how you want to call console log, right? So here it is. So you want to call console log here outside when you return it. So you can technically, you can console log in here, but you don't want to do that. When you're in this specific case, we really don't need to do that. We can console log out here, okay? And you'll see it will work. Now, why does this work? Right? That's kind of weird because we're like console logging a function technically, right? That's what it looks like. See, there it is. There's a 3. Well, we're not actually. We are console logging what it returns. Okay. Now, I will show you this right now. So here we can say const um, sum, right? Because that's what it is. It's a sum. And we can take the sum and we can console log it here if we want. And we can console log it down here as well. Okay, so that's what we're returning. So this return, which is the result, ends up becoming this sum. Okay, that's what ends up happening. And then we have this here. We remember I told you it's kind of like the one thing. So you have this box, you call it, it runs all this code for you, and then it just goes away, right? Well, this is the one thing that stays behind. Okay, your return is kind of like what you're leaving behind in the code. You're leaving behind, essentially, it's going to be sum. You can rename this whatever you want in this as well, but that's what this is, right? This result is the same as this sum because we're saying, okay, this is going to equal that. Okay, and then when we run this, there it is, 3 and 3. Okay, so the last one we have is loopy. Okay, and this is just showing you can put different things in functions. You can put anything you like. So in this case, we have a for loop that's going to go from 0 to 10. Well, in this case, 0 to 9, and it's going to console log each one of those, right? When we call it. So here's loopy being called. We're going to run the code. Um, oh, and yeah, that's pretty much it. Um, there isn't there isn't a lot to functions because that's essentially all a function is it's just this it's a box of code, and sometimes you can return things from it, like I showed you, and sometimes you don't need to. You can put parameters into it, like we have up here. Like with this add, we can add the two numbers and get 3. And it's reusable because You can put different numbers here if you want, right? So same thing with this actually. Here's a good example. So I don't know, call this num, right? And we can dynamically set this num. So we can say 5, right? And then we can do another loop with 10, okay? And then we can do another loop with, I don't know. And then when we run this, see, 0 to 5, or 0 to 4, 0 to 9, and then 0 to 2. See, it's much easier to write one line with an argument passed in, a parameter, than it is to do this copy, paste, paste, paste. You see that? It's much easier to do it this way than it is to keep copying and paste things. And that's what this is for. Okay. So that's kind of how a function works. Again, this is kind of the diagram. This is kind of visually what happens. Um, and yeah, so if you guys have any questions, please let me know. Definitely check out the W3 schools links that I'm going to put in the description, and they will also go over some of this stuff. I hope this helped. If not, like I said, please leave comments, and I will get to you as soon as I can. Alrighty.